On a freezing night in Nairobi, the wind howled like it wanted to tear everything apart. Kamau stood outside, shivering as snowflakes settled on his coat. He knocked again, hope fading with each unanswered call. Inside, Tajiwa and her family watched him through the frosted window, their faces cold and hard. They had made up their minds, to lock him out, both from the house and from their lives. Kamau's heart pounded, but it wasn't just the cold that cut deep. The laughter and sneers from inside felt like ice stabbing straight through his chest. No one came to open the door, no one called his name. He was left alone in the biting cold, a man betrayed by those he once trusted most. That night wasn't just about the snow or the chill in the air, it was about being shut out of a home that was supposed to be his safe place. As he pressed his hands against the icy glass, Kamau felt the weight of loneliness crushing him harder than the storm outside. Neighbors peeked from their windows but stayed silent, their eyes telling stories of old grudges and bitter secrets. Kamau's world was freezing over, not just because of the weather, but because the people he loved had turned against him in the coldest way possible. It was a night that would haunt him forever, the night he was locked out of more than just a house. Kamau had always thought that Tajiwa's family accepted him. He believed their smiles and kind words were real. But after that cold night when they locked him out, everything started to make less sense. Slowly, he began to see cracks behind those smiles, small signs he had missed before. People whispered when they thought he wasn't listening, and their eyes sometimes held a coldness he couldn't explain. The more he paid attention, the more he realized that the family had never truly welcomed him. It was painful to understand, but Kamau found out that Tajiwa's family had held grudges against him from the very beginning. They didn't like him, not because of anything big, but because of small things that had been blown out of proportion. Maybe he had said the wrong thing at a family dinner, or maybe he didn't meet some unspoken expectation. Whatever it was, those little moments grew into deep resentment. They never talked about it openly but kept their feelings hidden behind polite smiles and fake friendliness. Kamau also learned that some of these grudges came from jealousy or old family tensions. It wasn't just about him personally, it was about protecting family pride or old wounds no one wanted to heal. They saw him as an outsider, someone who didn't belong. And instead of trying to understand him, they chose to keep him at arm's length. The lockout wasn't a sudden act of cruelty, it was the result of years of silent hate and bitterness. The hardest part for Kamau was realizing that Tajiwa knew about this but didn't stop it. She stayed quiet while her family planned to push him away. He felt betrayed not only by the family but by the woman he loved most. It was like living in a house full of shadows, never knowing who was really on his side. The smiles were masks hiding feelings of anger and distrust. Despite the pain, Kamau felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, he understood why things had fallen apart. It wasn't his fault, it was years of hidden grudges that nobody wanted to face. This knowledge gave him a new kind of strength. He stopped blaming himself for the cold night outside the door. Instead, he saw it as the moment when the truth came out, painful but necessary. Kamau decided he would not let their hidden hatred destroy him. Knowing the secrets gave him the power to move on and rebuild his life. He realized that some people will never accept you, no matter how hard you try. But that didn't mean he had to stay trapped by their hate. The family's coldness was their problem, not his. Walking away from the house that night, Kamau's heart was heavy, but his mind was clearer than ever. He knew the real story behind the betrayal now, and he was ready to face the future with open eyes. The hidden grudges behind the smiles had caused him pain, but they would no longer control his life. Kamau was ready to write a new chapter. One where he was in charge. That night was the coldest Kamau had ever experienced, and it wasn't just the weather that chilled him to the bone. Outside, the snow fell hard, covering the ground with a thick, white blanket. The wind sliced through his coat like a sharp knife, making him shiver uncontrollably. But the worst part wasn't the freezing cold, it was the way he felt completely alone. As he stood there outside the house, locked out and helpless, Kamau realized just how isolated he truly was. The windows glowed with warm light, but behind the glass, Tajiwa and her family ignored his desperate knocking. Their faces were calm, almost cold, and they didn't even look his way. Kamau's heart ached more than his frozen hands. The pride he once had was shattered, crushed by the cruelty of those he thought loved him. He was not just outside the house, he was outside their world, pushed away like he meant nothing. Around him, neighbors watched quietly from their homes. No one came out to help or even ask if he was okay. Their silence was deafening, like a secret agreement to let Kamau suffer alone. Some probably thought this was his fault, maybe they believed he had done something to deserve such treatment. But no one spoke up, and that made Kamau feel even smaller, more invisible. He was a man stripped of dignity, standing in the snow, frozen in pain and humiliation. With each minute that passed, the cold seeped deeper into Kamau's bones, but the loneliness was colder still. He pressed his palm against the icy window, hoping for a sign that someone cared, that Tajiwa might change her mind. But the family remained silent, their smiles gone, replaced by a wall of bitterness and hate. Kamau swallowed the lump in his throat, fighting back tears and the urge to give up. This night wasn't just a test of endurance, it was a moment of truth. Kamau saw clearly how little he meant to those closest to him. He was not a husband or a family member anymore. He was an outsider, frozen out in more ways than one. The cold outside was a mirror of the coldness inside the hearts of the people who had once promised to stand by him. But even in that darkness, Kamau's spirit didn't break completely. The pain was sharp, but somewhere deep inside, a small flame of hope stayed alive. He knew he couldn't stay there forever. This night would change everything. It would be the moment he learned how strong he could be, even when everything around him was falling apart. As the hours dragged on, Kamau wrapped himself tighter in his coat and prepared to face whatever came next. The cold would not win. The silence would not defeat him. He was alone, yes, but not powerless. That night of cold and pain was just the beginning of a new fight, a fight to take back his life and find warmth again, on his own terms. Kamau had no idea what truly caused the cold night when Tajiwa's family locked him out. At first, he thought it was just anger or a fight gone too far. But as he looked closer, he uncovered something much darker, a secret betrayal that had been waiting in the shadows for years. This was not a random act of cruelty. It was revenge carefully planned by the people he trusted the most. The shock of this truth hit Kamau harder than the cold wind that night. Long before Kamau and Tajiwa met, there was an old argument between their families. Something happened that left deep wounds, though Kamau never knew the details. That old hurt had never healed. Instead, it quietly grew inside Tajiwa's family like a hidden fire. When Kamau entered their lives, they saw him not as a husband, but as a reminder of that past pain. The resentment they carried was more than personal dislike, it was a family grudge passed down like a secret weapon. Kamau was stunned to realize that his lockout was not about him at all. It was about an old betrayal he had nothing to do with, yet he was made to pay the price. Tajiwa's family had planned this act of revenge long ago, waiting for a moment to strike. The night he was left outside in the cold wasn't a mistake, it was a punishment. They used him to settle scores from a past he didn't know existed. Even more painful was the fact that Tajiwa knew about this old feud. She never told him. Instead, she chose to stay silent and sided with her family. To Kamau, this felt like the deepest betrayal. The woman he loved most had turned away from him when he needed her the most. Her silence was louder than any harsh words or angry looks. Though the truth was heartbreaking, it helped Kamau understand that this betrayal wasn't his fault. It wasn't about mistakes he had made or problems he caused. It was about a grudge so old and strong that it controlled the actions of those around him. Knowing this gave Kamau a strange kind of freedom. He stopped blaming himself and started seeing the situation for what it really was. Kamau realized that to heal and move forward, he had to accept the past but not be trapped by it. The betrayal cut deep, but it did not define who he was. He was not the enemy. He was a victim caught in a battle he never wanted. This understanding gave him strength to start rebuilding his life. The pain of being betrayed by those closest to him was real, but Kamau decided it would not break him. Instead, it became a reason to grow stronger. He knew his future wouldn't be ruled by old grudges or hidden secrets. Kamau was ready to leave behind the darkness of betrayal and create a new path filled with hope and courage. After that freezing night when Kamau was locked out and left to suffer alone, he felt like his whole world had fallen apart. The cold wasn't just outside, it was inside him too. His heart was broken, and his pride was crushed. But even in that dark moment, Kamau knew he couldn't give up. He had to find a way to stand back up and move forward. What saved him wasn't just his own strength, it was the loyalty of a true friend who refused to let him fall. This friend saw Kamau's pain and didn't turn away. Instead, they reached out with open hands and a listening ear. They reminded Kamau that he was not alone and that there was hope beyond the cold night and harsh betrayal. With their help, Kamau started to heal slowly. It wasn't easy, some days were filled with doubt and tears, but step by step, he began to rebuild his life. Kamau moved away from the place that held so many painful memories. Far from the cold house and the bitter faces, he found a new environment where he could breathe again. Here, he focused on himself and what he wanted for his future. He looked for work, surrounded himself with people who truly cared, and started to believe in his own worth once more. The pain of betrayal became a fuel, not a chain. Every setback was a lesson, every scar a reminder of how strong he had become. With his friend's support, Kamau learned to trust again. He stopped carrying the heavy weight of anger and sadness alone. Talking about what happened helped him see that betrayal didn't mean failure. It meant a painful truth he had to face, but it didn't have to define him. He discovered new dreams, new goals, and new reasons to keep going. Slowly, Kamau's confidence grew. The cold that once froze him was melting away, replaced by a fire inside that pushed him forward. He worked hard, saved money, and built a life based on respect and honesty. He wasn't the same man who had stood outside the locked door in the snow. He was stronger, wiser, and more determined. The journey wasn't just about survival, it was about rising. Kamau turned his pain into power, showing that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and support. His story became one of hope for others who felt lost or betrayed. It proved that no matter how cold the night, there is always a way back to warmth and light. Kamau knew the betrayal would always be part of his story, but it wouldn't be the ending. With his loyal friend by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The cold hands of betrayal had tried to hold him down, but Kamau had risen. And this time, nothing could stop him. After years of hard work and quiet struggle, Kamau was ready to return. He was no longer the man who had been locked out on that cold, painful night. He had built a new life far from the past, found success, and grown into a confident man. When he arrived at Tajiwa's family gathering, he was calm but powerful. The room was filled with familiar faces, people who had once ignored him, judged him, or worse. Now, all eyes turned to Kamau as he walked in. His success was clear in the way he carried himself, in his calm voice, and the respect he commanded. He was not there to beg or apologize, he was there to show the truth. Kamau didn't wait long before speaking. He stood before the family and told them exactly how they had treated him. He spoke about the night they left him outside in the freezing cold, about the deep hatred they hid behind their smiles. He revealed the secret grudges that had been passed down for years, the old pain that they used as a reason to betray him. The room fell silent as Kamau's words cut through the comfortable lies everyone had been living with. No one expected him to be so bold, so open. Some faces showed shock, others shame. But Kamau wasn't there to shame them for revenge. He spoke with quiet strength because he had already moved on. He wanted them to understand the damage their cruelty had done, not only to him but to the family they claimed to love. He wanted to take back the power they had stolen from him that night. His words made it clear that he was not a broken man anymore. He was stronger, wiser, and ready to claim the respect he deserved. Tajiwa's expression was hard to read. There was surprise, regret, and maybe a little fear. Kamau realized that she had to face what her family had done and her own role in it. She had chosen silence when he needed her most. Now, she had no choice but to listen. Some family members whispered apologies, others avoided looking at Kamau directly. The cold walls they had built around themselves began to crack. Kamau knew it would take time to heal these wounds, but this moment was a start. It was a moment when lies could no longer hide the truth. As the gathering ended, Kamau left with his head held high. He had faced his past and taken control of his story. The icy night that had once trapped him in pain was behind him. Now, Kamau was free, respected, and stronger than ever. His return was a clear message: betrayal might hurt, but it does not have to destroy you. It can make you rise, stronger and more determined than before. Kamau's journey of pain and betrayal had finally reached its turning point. He realized that true justice wasn't about hurting others back but about freeing himself from the past that held him down. After everything he had been through, Kamau knew his final act of revenge would not be about anger or revenge alone. It would be about reclaiming his life and showing the world, and himself, that he was no longer a victim. This was the moment when Kamau decided to rise with strength and grace, burning away the bitterness like fire purifies and clears the air. He didn't seek revenge by causing harm or destruction. Instead, Kamau took control of his future in the most powerful way, by building a new life based on respect, dignity, and love. He surrounded himself with people who believed in him, who supported his dreams, and who helped him grow. Every success became a quiet statement, a way of saying that the betrayal and pain could not break him. This was his justice. Proving that he could rise above the cruelty and still shine. Kamau's ultimate act was not to destroy those who hurt him but to break free from the chains of his past. He refused to be held hostage by anger or bitterness any longer. The fire inside him was not a fire of hate but a fire of courage, cleansing him from the pain and lighting a path forward. This new strength gave Kamau a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer defined by what others had done to him but by who he had become. At the same time, Kamau showed those who betrayed him that their cruelty didn't have the power to destroy him. His success and happiness were living proof that their bitterness was wasted energy. They lost control over his life the moment he chose to stop being their victim. Kamau's rise was a challenge to anyone who tried to bring others down, a reminder that true power comes from within. Most importantly, Kamau found love again, not just from others but within himself. He learned to forgive, not to excuse the past but to free his heart. This forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was his greatest strength. It allowed him to open doors to new relationships and new happiness. Kamau was no longer haunted by the cold nights or the locked doors. Instead, he was surrounded by warmth and kindness. Justice through fire meant Kamau's pain turned into power, his sorrow into hope. It was about transforming every hurtful moment into a step forward. Kamau's story became more than one of betrayal, it became a story of triumph, healing, and new beginnings. His final act was the most powerful revenge of all, a life well lived, full of respect, love, and freedom. That cold, painful night when Kamau was left outside in the freezing darkness could have been the end of his story. Instead, it became the beginning of something much greater. What started as frozen tears of sadness and loneliness turned into a fiery triumph that would inspire many others who faced betrayal and pain. Kamau's journey showed that even when life feels its harshest, it's possible to rise again stronger than before. People around him saw how Kamau took his hurt and used it as fuel to build a new life. He didn't let the cruelty break him, he let it make him stronger. His story traveled far beyond the cold walls of that house. It became a legend, a story about strength, courage, and hope. Kamau's journey reminded everyone that betrayal doesn't have to be the end. It can be the reason to fight back and rebuild. What made Kamau's triumph special was how real and human it was. He didn't become a hero by being perfect. He became one by being honest about his pain and refusing to let it control him. He showed that resilience is about facing the worst moments, feeling the pain fully, and then choosing to stand up anyway. This message touched many people who had their own struggles and losses. Kamau's story became a source of inspiration. It gave hope to those who felt frozen by their problems. It reminded them that no matter how cold and dark life gets, there is always a way to find warmth and light again. From frozen tears to fiery triumph, Kamau's life became proof that we can all rise above betrayal, grow stronger, and create new beginnings filled with respect and love.